Hi, I'm Simon. Thanks for tuning into The Ordinary Filmmaker. If you're new here, subscribe to get notification of new videos like this one so you don't miss any news, rumors, or tutorials. And by the way, I'm giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera to one lucky viewer. Details are in the description down below, or you can watch this video here, but essentially all you have to do is subscribe for your chance to win. But there are some terms and conditions, so go ahead and take a look at that video, and in the description down below, based on age or location, there are a few restrictions. Welcome to another weekly question and answer video. Now, if you would like your question answered by The Ordinary Filmmaker, post your question in the comments section down below. I'll get to your questions shortly, but first a quick recap of the news. Now, it has been a relatively slow news week, so this isn't going to take too long. Canon did announce their third quarter financial results, and they were a little bit better than expected due to increased sales from the R5 and the R6. In fact, Canon's gone ahead and said that they're going to deliver an extra 500,000 units over their initial estimates. That's about an 8% increase. They've also lowered the price of the RP kit with a 24-105 to $999. We have rumors that an APS-C RF body will be coming in the second half of 2021. The R5 is getting a firmware update in November, and Canon's about ready to release two lenses, the RF 50mm f1.8 and the 70-200 f4. These are expected to be announced any day now. Nikon also dropped the price on their D850 by about $500, and Sony dropped the price on the ZV-1. One thing's very clear, we're definitely getting into the holiday shopping season a little bit early. Yay! Anyhow, before getting to our first question, many of you complain that you're no longer getting notifications of my new videos. Go ahead and tap the subscribe button and make sure that it says all and not personalized. Now, I'm not the only one having trouble with this, but that can certainly help. All right, now for our questions. Our first question is from Jodoc. Will there be a Canon APS-C camera at the same level like the Fuji X-T4? I don't think so. Nothing on the rumor front is indicating as such. And if we look at what Canon's got out there right now, we've got the EOS R, and the EOS R when it first came out was $22.99, and it certainly doesn't punch, at least in video modes, the same as the X-T4. But if we look at the R6, now the R6 punches way above the X-T4 in terms of photo or stills capabilities, but video, not nearly as much. And I think the R6 is the closest to the Xt4. And if we look at other cameras like the 90D, which is a DSLR, a very capable camera, but when it comes to stills and video, it's kind of a hit and miss. One camera is better than the other. Other cameras to look at, well, the M6 Mark II is a mirrorless version of the 90D, and it more or less got some of the same trade-offs. Now the M5 Mark II, I still believe that camera's coming out based on rumors, and it certainly makes sense. But once again, I don't think it punches as high as the Xt4. So if you're looking for a camera that's pretty much equal to the Xt4, there's nothing in Canon's lineup that meets it. But I would say from photo capabilities, the R6 beats it. From a video capability standpoint, you almost have to go to the R5 to meet or beat it. But, you know, I would like to know a bit more about why you're asking this question. What are the capabilities you're looking for in a camera for stills and video? Are you more video-centric or still-centric? That's why I'm kind of having trouble here. I'm trying to get a feel for what you're looking for because, you know, the 90D or the M6 Mark II might be perfect for what you're looking at. Both are APS-C cameras, and then once we go up to the EOS R and the R6, we're into full-frame mirrorless, and everything functions very differently. It's like the laws of the universe change. I've been shooting with the Canon EF 50mm f1.2 for many years, but I didn't love it until I put it onto my R5. Full frame changes everything. James asks, will Canon ever get rid of their 30-minute recording limit? Even the tiny Sony ZV-1 doesn't have this crutch. What's Canon's business model here? Many hybrid shooters don't want cinema cameras, so it won't hit their cinema line. Lots of companies are beginning to listen to their customers as their business model and winning customers, yet Canon seems to be losing people to Sony, which could easily be avoided. Seems strange. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First and foremost, back in July, I think it was July the 10th, Pro AV interviewed a Canon technical specialist, if I can remember correctly, and I forgot the name of the woman. I want to say Martha, but it's not Martha. She didn't say firsthand, but what she more or less said was, is based on what she's been told, the record limits are going to be going the way of the dodo, so they're going to be getting rid of them. Now, we've had further communications from Canon saying what's going to be coming up in future firmwares. For the R5, they've said several things, C-Log 2 and 3, which is great. We're going to be getting 120 frames per second in 1080 as a video option. We're going to be getting Cinema Raw Light and a few other things, and of course, bug fixes. Now, the R6, they said at the time, hey, it's just out in the market. We've got to assess, and then we can tell you guys what we might do in a future firmware update. So I think it's definitely possible that it could go the way, it could be removed, but I think keeping up the pressure really, really helps. Now, in terms of listening to the customers and losing customers to Sony, I don't agree with you there. If we look at the sales for the R5 and the R6, it's not that Canon didn't produce enough of these cameras, it's just that the demand for them greatly exceeded expectations. And I do think part of that, though, was from not listening to their customers for many years, producing cameras like the 5D Mark IV, which, while is a very good camera, was kind of panned by reviewers for, well, things like motion JPEG. And I'll admit, I've been sitting waiting with my 70D for many years to find a camera that I thought was worthy enough for upgrading, which I eventually bought the R5. So we're getting huge sales numbers from the R5. I don't think that Canon is losing market share from this. In fact, if we look at the numbers for worldwide sales for 2019, Canon picked up over 2%. So they're not losing customers. Yes, some people might say, okay, I'm done with Canon, I'm going to the A7S III. And that's fine. I think the A7S III is a terrific camera. It's got some of the best video capabilities out there. It's a video-centric camera. It's got great low light. But to say it's better than the R5 or the R6, well, that really depends on what capabilities you're looking for in a camera. I think that if you're a photographer first, then something like the R6 or the R5 is going to be a better camera with good video capabilities. Whereas if you're really keen into video, well, then the A7S III is really the best camera. But keep in mind, every camera is a compromise. And a lot of professionals don't just have one body. They might have one body for photos and another body for lenses from the same company or different companies. And in a lot of cases, they have a separate body for different lenses, so they don't have to switch out lenses. They've got one camera here with one lens and the same camera body on the other shoulder with a different lens. So yeah, I don't think they're losing customers. The data is actually showing that Canon's actually picking up market share. Blocked Junction says, what's your take on Nikon mirrorless, especially the new Z7 Mark II and the Z6 Mark II? Do you have a love-hate opinion, such as I do, where you like the camera bodies, but the lenses leave a good amount to be desired? I'd say it's more of a love-frustration relationship. I, like many, do believe that Nikon's got some great cameras in the Z6 and Z7 Mark II. I think they're terrific, especially for video. I think they're highly capable cameras. The autofocus works well. Low light's pretty good. You've got enough video options for the ordinary filmmaker. But with lenses, yeah, Nikon doesn't seem to be hitting the news cycle with a lot of interesting stuff. Both Nikon and Canon relate to the game in terms of mirrorless and updating their lenses and bodies. Now, Canon seems to have woken up like they just got smacked at the back of the head while sleeping in the classroom. And they're pumping out bodies and lenses like crazy. But Nikon, like Canon, they have an adapter. You can use the FTZ adapter, so you can use a lot of the older lenses. Now, there are some caveats, of course, but if you use the FTZ adapter, doesn't it give you some great glass from the past? Now, as with Canon, depending on how far you go back, some of these lenses aren't going to work as well for video because the focus motors are pretty loud. And if you're a photographer first, then you've got a lot of options. If you're a videographer first, I can understand your frustration. Prince asks, new Canon R5 and R6 have IBIS. I want to know, are they able to give high-res mode or focus stacking? Yes, both of these cameras has focus stacking, but they don't call it focus stacking, they call it focus bracketing. And in fact, the EOS R also had this. Now, I'm going to give you the menus for the R5, so this is how you go ahead and set up focus bracketing. So from the camera menu, go ahead and click on Chapter 5, and there you can see that you've got focus bracketing. If it's disabled, go ahead and click on it and choose Enable. Here, set the number of shots that you want, and you essentially want to specify, as they say, the number of images that you want to capture per shot. Wow, 1,000 images for a shot. Couldn't imagine a scenario where you'd need that. And then set the focus increment. Specify how much shift in the focus that you want. The amount is automatically adjusted to suit the aperture value at the time of shooting. So you can see you definitely have focus bracketing. Now in terms of high-res mode, I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about, but I'm going to make the assumption that this is photography-based as focus bracketing is, and I think you're probably talking about something like a pixel shift technology. And in that case, no, neither of them do. And honestly, now you might have a very good reason for using this, but for most of us, I think this is more of a marketing ploy. To really be effective, you need everything to be completely still. Now, I'm not just talking about in the frame of what you're planning on shooting, but also the tripod, the ground that you're on, and like the Panasonic S1R, to get that pixel shift to really, really work, you can't have any blades of grass moving or the tree moving, or you're going to get some strange artifacts. And even the ground that you're on, there's some movement or a slight movement from the breeze. So I don't think that pixel shift is really very usable in very many scenarios. Now, if you have used it in the past and you guys like pixel shift, tell me how you've used it. And actually, I'd love to see some shots if you could provide me some shots where you've used it. But to me, I think it's more of a fad. In fact, with my Canon R5, 45 megapixels, most of the times I'm downsampling, I'm producing smaller images, especially for social media. Moving Matt asks, I see in your descriptions that you offer consultations. Is that only for English as a second language, or do you offer consultations on YouTube stuff, business, and filmmaking advice? You know, Matt, you're the first person to ask me that since I've had the channel, but you're the second person to ask me that as part of this Q&A session. So yes, I do consultations. I said do, didn't I? Okay, I'll try not to do it again. I do consultations. The site that I'm using is based off of an ESL site where I teach English as a second language. And instead of creating another site, they do a great job of scheduling, of handling all the finances and everything, where all I have to do is show up and then teach or consult. So I'm leveraging that, so you can use it for whatever you'd like. I'll talk to you about anything. The key areas, though, that I think you'll get the best value out of, if you're looking at setting up a YouTube channel, if you have any questions about my set, you want to talk in depth about what you're trying to set up, and I can talk to you from an architecture point in terms of the actual physical stuff, gear, kits, and all that you're going to be using. But I can also talk to you from a standpoint of business architecture. And this applies to any business when you're starting up. It's very important to understand the key foundation of what you're trying to accomplish. What is your vision? What's your mission? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? And what are some objectives? Let's try to bring those goals down to a more concrete, measurable level. And of course, at some point, you're going to need to come up with capabilities. So you've got your goals and objectives, but what are your capabilities that you're trying to deliver, or the results that you're trying to get? Outcomes, right? So like for a camera, the R5, what is an outcome? Well, you want reliable, accurate autofocus. That's an outcome. It's not a specification. Eye autofocus, animal autofocus, up to 10 feet, that's more of a specification. So I can help you from a YouTube standpoint, I can help you from videography, filmmaking, or even from a business architecture standpoint. And if you look at my description down below, it's got a link to the site, and it's got the rates in there. I think right now the rate is, and I can't remember if I'm correct on this, I believe it's $50 US an hour. So, yep. And of course, through that site too, you can ask me questions. So as soon as you post a question in there, I'll get it. So if you want to ask me questions about what you want to talk about ahead of time, that helps me get better prepared for our session. Frosty asks, I think cameras need to be connected via cell or Wi-Fi. Do you think camera makers are behind the curve, or is this a bad idea? I think the idea of being tethered to the cloud, which is actually not being tethered at all, the idea of being connected to the cloud, being connected to some sort of network in the sky, is better than having dual SD cards or dual CF Express cards, because somebody can always steal your camera. The idea of having high-speed cell or Wi-Fi, or let's just say high-speed multi-banded communications where you can have up to a gigabit or 5 gigabits speeds per second. Now, whatever you shoot can automatically be uploaded to the cloud, can be uploaded to your servers. And with those speeds, it's fast enough to transfer your video as well. So I get this a lot. People are saying, well, if the camera doesn't have dual card slots, I'm not going to get it. Well, are you photo or video? Your video. Well, then it doesn't really matter which camera you get. Most cameras don't record the video to both card slots. And I was corrected sort of last week saying, oh, the R5 does record to both card slots. Well, it does in only one particular scenario. If you're shooting 8K and it's RAW, you can choose to record a proxy file to the UHS-2 card slot. And to me, that is not making your information redundant. A proxy file doesn't contain nearly as much information. And if you can do it with a proxy file and do it with 8K RAW, then there's no reason Canon couldn't do it with 4K, for example. So I think there's a definite need. Now, not everybody will be able to afford this because it's not going to be cheap to be able to have that much bandwidth. I mean, just look how much your regular cell plan costs. And if you're going to be moving, gigabytes of data, it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to be for professionals where they grab the shot, they're in a remote location, and they really want to get that information back to their bosses instantly. Dan says, I've heard that the R6's custom modes don't allow you to save video settings. Is this true? And if yes, is there a workaround? Also, does this problem exist with the R5? For potential Canon 90D owners, does this problem exist with C1 and C2 modes? Dan, that's a really good question. I'm sure you're not the only person who's thought of this. Before I get into my long explanation, yes, the R5 functions the same way. I have 3 custom modes. Custom mode 1 is my studio setup. Custom mode 3 is an outside environment version of my studio. So when I do my shots outside for the YouTube channel, I have them set up a certain way because I'm always using that 50mm f1.2. So C3 is a little bit different from my C1. Now C2, that's for my fun and gun stuff, and that's usually where I have the 24-105 on there, so I'll have different settings. Now, here's the thing. I'm constantly switching between C1 and 2 and 3. And the reason why I have them set up is because when I had my Canon 70D, I didn't have enough custom modes, and the problem was when I would go outside and shoot, I'd fiddle around with things, and I'd come back inside, and I'd question myself, uh-oh, what was my ISO? What was my f-stop? Because you get things dialed to where they're perfect, and now you've got to spend an hour or two figuring out how you have it. You have to record it in multiple different ways, take it into post, see how it looks. Well, the great thing about C-Log1 is, let's say I decide I'm going to do things a little differently here, or I'm going to go outside and shoot. I make changes. Now, as soon as I turn that camera off, my studio settings are exactly the way I want them. So C1, if I'm shooting like I am here, I never have to worry about setting up the camera in any way whatsoever. And that's a big plus. Now, if I'm going to do some studio segments outside, I use C3. And now sometimes I might make some changes there, depending on the lighting, depending on a few other things, but most of everything is where I want it. Now, here's the thing. If you're actually able to make changes to those settings, then, okay, here's the problem. If you don't write down those settings, then you forgot what you had before, and it kind of defeats the purpose of the custom settings. So here's what I might suggest. Create your custom settings for, let's say, one for inside, one for outside, or one for professional use and one for custom use. Whatever your scenarios are, set up the 2 scenarios and set them up for what is 80% of the time. Now, for the rest of those times, then go ahead and shoot in manual mode, dial your settings to the same as what you have in C1 or C2, and then it doesn't matter if you turn your camera off, you're going to keep those settings. So that's what I'd consider to be the workaround. But I love the fact that I've got 3 custom modes. 2 is almost not enough, but 3 is almost perfect. And of course, when you've got that manual mode, your manual mode pretty much functions as a 4th custom mode if you don't play around with it. Or think of it this way. On your R6, you've got 3 custom modes. You've got manual, C1, and C2. And the manual mode is your custom mode where you can play around with the settings. There's your workaround. Lady Lincoln asks, can you explain what all-I is? I hear it talked about a lot, but don't really hear anyone giving me an explanation as to why it's so great. Well, Lady Lincoln, you're really asking me 2 questions. First of all, what is all-I? And the next question is, what does it do for me? What are the outcomes of all-I? So let's first of all define what it is. This frame here shows us all-I or IPB. Now, when recording an all-I, what the camera does is for every single frame, it lays down a complete image of that frame. What IPB does is it lays down an image of the frame every 3rd frame. And what it's doing in those other 2 frames is it's using some complex math and some really smart algorithms to essentially guess. That's right. Now, there's a big benefit to this. One, it takes up a lot less space. So back in the days when SD cards were very expensive, this was a big plus. But there's one negative too. It takes a lot more processing power on your computer. So why do we want, or why are we willing to deal with all I files that are 3 times as big as IPB? Well, it depends on what you're shooting. For what I'm shooting right here, this video where it's essentially a talking head with some frames coming up, IPB is more than fine. You're not going to notice any issues. But now, if I shot some scenes with rain or snow or where there's a lot of movement in the frame, leaves and whatnot, the algorithms have difficulty predicting what's going to be in those missing frames, and what you end up with is artifacts, some strange anomalies. And there's plenty of videos on YouTube that show you what happens when you film IPB in rain or other situations. For most of us ordinary people, watching videos that we create, we're not going to really notice a difference. But for professionals or people that are trying to improve their game, we notice, and it's annoying, it's frustrating. So one is all eyes a lot faster, and you don't have any of those visual artifacts. But your computer too, if you've got an older computer, then even though it's going to take up more space, IPB is going to be harder to edit. So did that answer your question? If not, post your question in the comment section down below, and I can go into it in a bit more detail in my response to your follow-up question. Phil says, Simon, I have the Angelbird CF Express 512GB card for the R5. I noticed that when I power up my camera, it would take around 5 seconds for the screen settings to appear. Some have pointed that the symptoms to being a slow card issue, but it's the CF Express card, and I shoot 7-minute 8K RAW at 140 gigabit with it. The same issue doesn't come up when I'm using the SD card inside. I thought I'd ask you since I saw your video on the Angelbird 2TB CF Express card. Do you experience the same issue with the CF Express? Simple answer, yes I do. Now in that video and my follow-up to that video, what I mentioned is this is a known issue with Angelbird, and it only happens with a Canon EOS R5. They said that they're working on the issue and they're going to be issuing a firmware update to take care of this. So if you have the R5, a firmware update's coming, and if you don't have the R5, it's not an issue. And yes, I'm not shooting it with right now because I'm using the Ninja V. I'm doing a review of it, so I'm getting used to it. But the 2TB CF Express card, I don't really, when I use that card, I'm generally shooting longer videos, and so it takes a few seconds to set up. It's not really a big deal for me because, well, I'm old and I'm a little slow. But yeah, that will be fixed in a firmware update shortly. Little Eons asks, we know that the R5 overheats. What if you change the CF Express card to a different CF Express card? Would that essentially stop the overheating issue? It stops working because it doesn't want to fry your cards, so why don't you just change out the cards? Wouldn't that fix the problem? Simple answer, no, it wouldn't fix the problem. Your first question though is, would other cards that generate less heat solve the problem? No. I've got the Angelbird 2TB CF Express card, and I've got the Pro Grade 325 Cobalt CF Express card. And while the Angelbird does run a little less hot, it's kind of like saying which is hotter, the surface of the sun or a volcano. Well, both are going to kill you. Both are scorching hot. And CF Express cards just generate an awful lot of heat. So let me talk to that a little bit more. When it comes to overheating on the R5, there's a couple of ways you can work around it. Now, number one is, if the ambient temperature is 60 degrees Fahrenheit or about 19 degrees Celsius, you're not going to get any overheating. Now, that's the ambient temperature. So if you're outside or inside and the temperature is 60 degrees or less, you're not going to get any overheating in any of the overheating modes. None whatsoever. Now, I have done some further testing up to about 65 degrees, but it was windy outside, so it's not controlled data. I'm trying to test this with absolutely calm. But if there's wind, then that definitely helps keep the cameras cool. And I've shot for up to 2 hours in 4K HQ using CF Express cards. And yes, I had to start and stop because of the 30-minute record limit. But in terms of ambient temperature, that's where it really makes a difference. Now, I know a lot of you are shooting in hot climates, and that's not acceptable. I'm currently shooting with the Ninja V external recorder. I don't have any CF cards. I don't have any cards at all in the camera. And I've been shooting at this point for, let's see, what's my timer? 48 minutes. It's great. I haven't had to start and stop the recording. I can see because of the red line around the Ninja that I'm still recording. And so that really helps too. So if you're... reason why I'm not sure what to say here is you've got to think of why you're buying this camera. If you're buying it primarily for video and you're in hot climates, you're going to be shooting in hot temperatures a lot, then the R5 isn't the camera for you. It is primarily a stills camera with really good video capabilities. But if you're shooting shorter clips and you're not shooting long videos, or you're shooting in temperatures considerably less than 80 degrees, you're going to find that it's going to be a great camera for photo and video most of the time. But if you do want to get the R5 because it's a great photo camera, but you want to use the video capabilities, but not get a second camera, then consider getting a Ninja 5 or some other external recorder. And I know I'm going to get some comments of people saying, yes, but Simon, I've spent $4,000 on this camera. Why should I spend another $1,000 on an external recorder? Now, my video where I'm going to review the Ninja 5 is going to get more into detail, but here's a very simple thing. No matter what card you go with, the fastest card, if I shoot an hour of video or more, it's going to be a long time to move that off. Even with a CF Express card, it can take 10 to 20 minutes for over an hour of video, especially if it's 4K. If it's 8K, it can go even longer. And then I'm probably going to want to convert that into Apple ProRes or Avid's codec before I start editing. Now you're starting to eat up hours a day, and that's costly. Very costly. You look at the Ninja 5, you're looking at essentially about $1,200 fully kitted out for what you need. Yes, I know they start at $599, but you're going to need a lot more than that unless you've already got the stuff in your studio. So that Ninja 5, what it does, and what I'm recording right now, is I'm recording in Apple ProRes 422. So once I'm done, I take the SSD out of the back of this unit, bring it over to my computer, slide it into my docking bay, and I edit right off the card. No transfers. That right there alone is enough to get this card. Don't like the anti-alias filter? Want to get the information right off the sensor? There's another reason for it. Have a camera that offers 10-bit 422 but only 3 external? There's another reason. So yes, it's $1,200 more, but if you're making money from your gear, that $1,200 can be paid back in a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how busy you are. So I hope that answered your question. Day asks, I heard the slow motion on the R5, 120 frames per second in 4K, is not true slow motion according to some people that have tested it. Can you explain what that means? No, I can't because I don't know who you're quoting and I don't know what they were doing. And let me explain a bit about what 120 frames per second is. First of all, it isn't slow motion. 120 frames per second in 4K means that you're capturing 120 frames every second and they're 4K. Have you seen the movie Gemini Man? That movie was shot at 120 frames per second. But it's not slow motion, is it? Because the project that they set up in whatever nonlinear editor that they were using, or NLE, was set to 120. So you bring in footage that's 120 frames per second into a 120 frames per second project, there's no slow motion. You only get slow motion when there's a difference in speed between what you're shooting at and what the project is. So currently right now, I'm shooting in 4K at 30 frames per second. Now, if I shot some video at 120 frames per second, brought them into my computer, set up the project at 4K, 30 frames per second, then brought in some video I shot at 120 frames per second, then I would get 4 times slow-mo. And that's why a lot of times in these cameras, they don't call it slow motion because it's all about the frame of reference. It's all relative. And as you can see in this video here, which was shot at 120 frames per second, it is slowed down significantly. And it's by a factor of 4 because this project is shot at and edited in 30 frames per second. Does that help? If you can find those sources and find out what they were actually stating and put it in the comment section down below, then maybe I can answer a little bit more. But I think that's a better understanding of what the different frame rates mean. And if you shoot in 60 frames per second and that's your project speed, and you shoot at 4K 120 or 1080p 120, whatever the resolution is, and you bring 120 into a 60 frames per second project, then you got a 2 times slow motion. Bao asks, with a new announcement of the 50mm f1.8 RF lens, will there be any new lenses released by year's end? If so, which lenses do you think will be released? If not, When do you think new lenses will be released next year, and which ones? We only have one lens coming out in 2020 that I'm aware of, and this comes from Canon Rumors, and it was from a story they put out on October the 10th. We're supposed to be getting the Canon RF 70-200mm f4 image stabilized USM lens, and I put out a story earlier this week that confirms this, and we should be getting an announcement for this one any day now. Now in 2021, we're going to be getting two tilt shift lenses, the 14mm f4 and the 24mm f3.5. We'll be getting the RF 10-24mm f4, the 14-35 f4 image stabilized USM lens, and we'll get the 24mm f1.8 image stabilized STM macro. Also in 2021, we're going to get the RF 100mm f2.8, the 135mm f1.4, and there was a rumor that we were going to be getting the 70-135. I don't see that anywhere. We'll get the 100-400mm f5.6 to 7.1, the 400mm f2.8, 500mm f4, 600mm f4, 800mm f5.6, and the 1200mm. So those are all the lenses that we're rumored to be getting in 2021 and later this year. And as you can see, rumors aren't always correct. So not only are we getting the 70-200, but we're also getting the 50mm f1.8. So those lenses should be announced relatively shortly, and I'd expect them to be available for sale pretty quick as well. I was trying to decide between the R5 and the C70. I shoot in a lot of tropical environments, so the R5 seems sketchy with that. And I'd like more of a hybrid than a C70. Do you think the EOS R1 will be best of both worlds? Do you think it will have a flip screen? Do you expect the cripple hammer will strike? I would love to purchase your consulting services. Can I use that for YouTube or business advice? Maddie, this is a terrific question. Thank you. You've given me a lot of information, but there's still not enough. I need to understand better some of the problems you face when you shoot, what the different scenarios you shoot in. So obviously the tropic environments is one, but what kind of stuff are you shooting? How much video work are you shooting? You said the C70, so it sounds like you're doing a lot of video. And you also mentioned the R5. Now, here's my thought. I'm going to make some assumptions here. I'm going to make the assumption that you're shooting a lot of video. You might be more video-centric. You take that R5, you put it into a tropical environment, you're not going to be happy. Not unless you buy 3 or 4 of them, and that is an option. Nobody on a film set is going to have just one camera because these things overheat, these things break. You need to have multiple cameras to be ready to go at all times. But I think that the heat tolerances for the R5, you just have to look at what Canon's put out there. Once you get over 80 degrees, your cool down time is going to be extended. Your record times are going to be truncated. You're not going to be happy with that camera. As a stills camera, it's great. In cooler environments, like if you're shooting in 65 degrees and less, you're going to be very happy with the R5. But I'm not even sure that the C70 is going to be perfect for what you're doing. I need to understand better the environment you're going to be shooting in and the capabilities that you need. So if you're looking at getting consultation with services with me, I do it. It's for a full hour each session, and that covers pretty well anything you want to talk about, whether it's building a channel, whether it's business architecture, whether it's building a business, analyzing your business, understanding your business's problem statements, what your goals and objectives are, and how to get from where you are today to your desired future state. So I can help you with that as well. And also, what is free is you can post a follow-up question in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you as well. Nikon asks, has the move towards mirrorless cameras been beneficial for photographers in regards to longevity and robustness of the camera, or beneficial for camera manufacturers to cut costs down? Well, there's a couple of things here. The first thing is they're not saving money by moving to mirrorless. Canon has to spend an awful lot of money on research and development, as does Nikon and many other companies. And the problem is the market, and quite often the market share of a lot of these camera companies is decreasing, with the exceptions of Sony and Canon, which both grew their market share in 2019. So in terms of does it benefit us? Well, from a point of view of Canon, I can't tell you. The EOS R came out in 2018. In terms of reliability and longevity, 2 years is not enough. Quite often these cameras, like the DSLRs, can go for years and years. My 70D, I shot with it every day for 7 years, and it still works. Now, what we can do is we can look at Sony. We can look at Panasonic. They've been in mirrorless for a long, long time. And we don't hear a lot of people saying, yeah, my GH5, my GH4, it's dead. No, quite often they'd rather upgrade first, or they're keeping these cameras for a very long time. They're not breaking down. They seem to be quite robust. But with any new technology, we just have to wait and see. So if you're buying Canon and Nikon, they haven't been in it as long. What will happen with IBIS? Is that sturdy? Will it last 7 to 10 years? Or is that a component that's going to break down in 3 or 4? We just don't know. But one thing is for certain. The future is with mirrorless. Canon, who has 45% market share, they've committed to mirrorless. They've said that they're not going to be developing any new focal lengths for the EF system. And as far as EF bodies goes, I think the 1DX Mark III was the last. Look at the R5, the R6, a lot of new technology that's in there and how well these cameras perform. And now Canon's talking about the R1. Well, they're not. We're getting some leaks, but the R1's coming out next year as well. So I think for us as photographers and videographers, there's some huge benefits. But that doesn't mean that DSLR is dead. If you look at worldwide sales for DSLRs, a bulk of what Canon sells to this day, at least up until the first quarter of 2020, the bulk of their sales were DSLRs. But that doesn't mean that DSLRs are the top selling because people want them. It's because that Canon really wasn't producing mirrorless cameras that professionals wanted, or even hobbyists like me wanted. What is the probability of the R1 and RF mount crop-sensored mirrorless camera to be announced on the same day with R1 specialized glass featuring the quad-pixel autofocus in both? Well, according to the rumors, the R1 is going to be announced sometime in 2021. Some of the rumors say in the second half, but if the Olympics go ahead, I can guarantee you that camera is going to come out in the first half, probably announced early in the year, and then be available May or June. In terms of quad-pixel autofocus, I've received some credible sources saying it's going to have quad-pixel autofocus. We have a patent for quad-pixel autofocus. So it's very probable that's going to come. And when they're going to release the R1, they're going to release it with a bunch of lenses. And if you look at my previous question where I talked about all the rumored lenses coming in 2021, you can see a lot of those would really take advantage of a camera like the R1. German asks, what's your opinion about AI software in photography? Some people think it's destroying the art, while others are just embracing it. The future, like film versus digital days. Yeah, that's a good question. For me, I think it's the next best thing. Canon's doing great things with it. Their autofocus system is really terrific. They're using AI. The R1's going to use AI a whole lot more. But I think you really kind of nailed it. It's some of us, we love change in technology. We just better, faster, more capabilities. While others say, you know what? Why do we need this? Why do we need color film? Black and white's fine. Why do we need autofocus? Manual focus is fine. Professionals don't use autofocus. Professionals don't use color. Professionals don't do digital. Professionals don't use AI, right? Professionals don't go mirrorless. And this has been a human condition since the beginning of recorded history. Some of us embrace change, some of us don't, and it's the same thing with cameras. I think AI is going to play a big role, and at this point, I don't see any problems with it. It's not like iRobot where it's trying to take over us, is it? Look here, son, asks, what year was log format first made and used, and where? What companies were first to implement log in their cameras? This started off as a simple question, and it took hours to even try to find any credible information, and I couldn't. The next step would be going to a library, but I've decided to do something different to answer your question. So I'm going to put up a few slides and walk you through some information that I was able to find, and then take you through a bit of an overview of really what is the point of log and should we use it. So while I can't talk to Nikon and whoever came up with the first log, it was definitely developed for video digital cameras, and C-Log1 was actually developed for the C300 Mark II, and it was designed around 8-bit. Now, log profiles are designed for a specific camera or sensor. So if you download a log file for the EOS R and apply it to the R5, it's not going to work that well. And guess what? I found this out firsthand. The R5, when it first came out, and I had it early, they didn't have the lookup tables. So I called Canon support, and they said, yeah, just grab it for the EOS R. Yeah, that didn't go very well. And that's because for each camera, the log files are built specifically for that sensor and that camera. Now, C-Log2 isn't better than C-Log1 or C-Log3. You might think, well, C-Log2 came after C-Log1, so it's better, and C-Log3 must be better than 2 and 1, right? No, not at all. And I'm going to get into more details here, but C-Log1 was built for 8-bit. C-Log3 was built for 10-bit. So let's take a look at C-Log1, 2, and 3 and see what the main differences between these are. And then I'll answer the big question. Should we use log for our videos when we're recording? And if so, when and where? So C-Log1 isn't as aggressive in the shadows and highlights. So you're not going to get a lot of noise, but you're not going to necessarily get the best results of all the 3 different log profiles. Now C-Log2, it is able to grab more information out of the darks, but it clips your light at 92.5 RRE. You do get more detail out of the shadow, but you're going to get more noise, and it's going to take a lot more to edit in post. And if you use C-Log1 and go to C-Log2, you might start pulling your hair out thinking like, why is this not working? Why am I spending so much time in editing? But you almost need to look at them stacked together to really see which one works in which situation. So these key points that I'm throwing up there kind of help break down where you should use them. And this is where C-Log3 comes in. And the C-Log3 is more of a balance between C-Log1 and C-Log2. So C-Log3 requires a lot less work in post. It does provide more detail in shadows and highlights, and you don't get that clipping at 92.5 IRE. And of course, it's meant for 10-bit processing. So when Canon releases C-Log2 and C-Log3 for the R5, should you use them? Well, let me put it to you this way. If the scene that you're shooting has a lot of contrast between light and dark, yes, use C-Log. If you don't want to spend a lot of time dealing with noise, then maybe start off with C-Log3 and then try C-Log1. But C-Log2, you're going to definitely have to do a lot more work. Now, if you don't have a lot of differences in contrast, you're shooting on a cloudy day, you're shooting in a shady area, then you're probably not going to benefit a whole lot from C-Log. Also, if your ISO is somewhere between 100 and 400, you're also not going to get the most amount of dynamic range. You get the best performance if your ISO somewhere up towards 600 or 800 ISO. So really good question, and I hope I answered it. But in terms of who was the first to come out with it, don't really know. But I think the biggest thing with C-Log is people think, because it's the only way to get 10-bit on the R5, but a lot of people are using these and they're getting confused. And once C-Log 2 and 3 comes out, which will be in November at some point, there's going to be a lot more head scratching. Goes, I don't understand this. Why is this not working for me? So this little summary here should help give you an idea of when to use C-Log and whether to use 1, 3, or 2. Grinicide asks, any developments on the A74 announcement? Leaked announcement dates have varied from November 2020 to Q3 2021. Any idea what specs it's going to bring? Will it just replace the A7 III? I'm sad to say that there's been no update since, well, a couple of months ago. And at the time they were saying we could get something in October, and yeah, October's over. So we're not going to get anything in October. My thoughts are we're not going to get an announcement until probably Q1 of next year, maybe Q2 release. In terms of specs, I don't like quoting a lot of Sony specs unless it's just something being published, because Sony specs aren't very accurate. And the reason is Sony does a very good job of keeping their information close. Quite often when we do get rumors of Sony stuff, when we compare it to what the actual camera is, they're usually quite off, and the A7S III was no exception. The sensor was completely wrong. So I wish I could give you more information, but it's definitely going to be better than the A7 III. It's going to be a great camera. The A7 III was a great camera. The A7 IV is going to be a great camera. We're just going to have to wait. As soon as I get more information, I'll publish it. Did I say publish? Publish. I'll publish it. And our last question is from Prince. Cinema raw light or proxy editing? Couldn't be any more concise than that. So since you were very concise, I'm going to answer it in the way I think you meant to ask it. Cinema raw light is going to be coming to the Canon EOS R5 in the next firmware update, according to Canon rumors. And proxy editing? No, I'm not using it. I only use proxy editing when I'm doing any sort of 8K work. Right now I am testing out the Ninja V, and I'm recording that in ProRes 422. So hopefully that did answer your question. So guys, we come to the end of another Q&A series. I just want to cover a couple of things before I close off. Let's see, how long have I been recording here? I've been recording for, wow, that's quite a long time, 1 hour and 15 minutes. but I probably spent about 10 minutes of that just trying to get the introduction out of the way. I just couldn't get my words out. It's late, it's Thursday, and I wanted to do it now so I can have my weekend free again, and I'm getting some new gear. I've got this Viltrox that just arrived today. It's a 23mm f1.4 STM, and it's for the EFM mount. So once again, the Village Mayor is going to be joining me in a top secret location in rural Canada, and we're going to be testing out this lens for photo and video. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. It's actually silver. Let's see if I can open it now on camera, because I don't have my glasses, so I'm usually terrible at opening things. I can't see where, oh, it's this way, I think. I could probably hunt down my glasses. Ah. Well, there goes that tape. Oh, I see what the tape has reapplied itself. There, that should work. There we go. So I'm kind of doing the unboxing now. But, you know, I like the look of this thing, and I love the size of the EFM mount lenses. They're just absolutely tiny. I love the silver look to it. It's lightweight. It actually feels lighter than the Pair gear, but until I do the review, I don't know. So me and the Village Mayor, we're going to be testing this one out this weekend. So that's why I'm shooting this video now. But the real thing I wanted to talk to you about is the Ninja V that I've had for a couple of days now. It's funny because I've talked about it in the past, and it's funny when your predictions come true when you're actually using it. And one of the things that I've had to get used to is there's more settings, more things you have to check. So when I'm recording my videos in here, there's a setting called Legalize, and essentially if I don't turn that on, the shadows take over. It's pretty bad, so I'll get into that in the review, but so I have to turn that on. I need to check to make sure that I'm recording in the right format, and check a few other settings. But what's really nice is I've been recording for, I guess, an hour and 20 minutes now, and I know I'm still recording because I can see up top. Yeah, and it's still focusing, so the battery might be getting ready to die on the R5, so I probably should wrap things up pretty shortly here, but I can see the big red rectangle around the Ninja V, and it's high enough up that it doesn't distract me from looking at you. You'll notice that most of the times I was looking directly at you, and I wasn't kind of looking off to the top of the Ninja. But that red line, it's thick enough that if it turns off, I know the camera stopped recording. So I'm really excited by that, and I'm also really excited that when I bring this into the computer, I don't have to spend 30 or 40 minutes converting it to Apple ProRes. I've just saved myself that time right there. Oh, and the time it takes to copy it off the CF Express card and onto the computer, I don't have that time either. So there's about another 10 or so minutes saved, and especially at an hour and 20 minutes now, it's probably more 10 to 20 minutes. And so that's the power of it. Yes, it's got a whole bunch of tools. Yes, it's got a whole bunch of waveforms and all that stuff. And it was very helpful today when I was shooting the product shots for it, because, you know, as I was adjusting the focus, I was looking at the screen and it looked pretty good. But when I saw the histogram, you're like, oh no, I'm clipping the highlights here, and I brought it down, and it was just perfect. I was very, very happy with it. So I'm going to continue the review. I'm going to use it a lot more because I want to see what are the gotchas with it too. And that, like that one thing with Legalize, the problem is I actually have to, every time I shoot, toggle that on. So it's another thing I have to remember. And as much as I like it, I want to get as close to the camera as possible. I don't like having a lot of attachments because it's more batteries, it's more that can go wrong, it's more settings that I have to remember, and there's that. But that's it for now. Just one more thing. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, go ahead and subscribe for your chance to win the Syncolav S6E and M3 shotgun microphones. I'll be awarding these two prizes to one lucky viewer once the channel reaches 20,000 subscribers. And then, for every 10,000 subscribers after that, I'll be awarding a more expensive and better prize until the channel reaches 100,000 subscribers, at which point I'll be giving away a brand new Canon EOS R5 full-frame mirrorless camera to one lucky viewer. And on that bombshell, thanks for watching The Ordinary Filmmaker. We'll see you again soon.